We're taking a break from talking about players and what players will do in the upcoming season to talk about the head coach, Ryan Day. Here with me is Jeff Hunt from the Off the Ball Network. We're talking expectations for Ryan Day in the upcoming season and then also over the next 3 to 5 years. We'll talk about it, dissect it, and you'll hear it all right here on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Wednesday, February 23rd in the year 2022, and I would like to thank every person out there for making Locked On Buckeyes their first to listen or first watch of every single day. Here with me for the first time in, I think, a month, it is Jeff Hunt from the Off the Ball Network. We were chopping it up before we went on air. And Jeff, I'm glad you're back. And this is the perfect topic for you. The only thing that'll make this show better is if you brought out your coach's hat as you talk about the head coach, Ryan Day.
Yeah, you're right, man. Again, I'm ready. It feels like, I mean, it honestly, the NFL postseason was so great. It feels like it's been a year since the end of the college football season, which was a pretty good, football season. I am definitely ready to, I've talked so much Super Bowl and NFL playoffs and quarterback rankings. I'm ready to talk about my beloved Buckeyes again. So I appreciate you having me on for this.
Of course, you're a fan favorite. People have already said they're excited to hear you back on the show. And this is a topic that I believe is perfect for you and some conversations we have had on the show and even off the show. Ryan Day, the head coach at Ohio State, is someone that has done a phenomenal job for a first-time head coach at any level. I will not sugarcoat that. I will not say he has not. If you have not been a head coach at any level and you are following a Hall of Famer at said level you are currently at, I think if you would say that he has won conference championships and he has done some things that have been really good, he's up some things in recruiting, he has put guys into the NFL, with everything he has done, I would think you could say he's done a phenomenal job as a first-year head coach, keeping that in context. Now, has Ryan Day been perfect? Absolutely not. Was the loss to Michigan ugly? Absolutely. Should it be something that puts fire under everybody's belt? I would 100% think so. But when I think in totality, before getting into my expectations for Ryan Day, I think I want to keep it in proper context. A first-year head coach, if you're at the high school level, the college level, the pro level, any sport, first-year head coach are doing what he has done, having really losses that you can think about in your head because those losses stick out. You could fit them on one hand. I think he's done a phenomenal job when you're saying this is first time being a head coach at any level. Jeff, do you agree?
I do. I think he's had great success. There's been some flaws, there's been some growing pains, but he's also done some great things,
Yes.
changing quarterbacks, going to the playoffs. Obviously the loss versus Michigan was, a tough one. The loss versus Oregon was, a really tough one. So, there's been speed bumps in the way, but as an Ohio State fan, like he, 2 playoffs, a playoff victory, a shot at the national championship in year 2, dealing with the last 2 or 3 years hasn't been easy on football programs when you do something that's based on gathering a bunch of people and then you can't gather people, all the obstructions in the way. I thought he handled that really well. He's handled a lot of, we'll call mini controversies, with players leaving, in the middle of a game, slight quarterback controversy at the beginning of this year, the transfer portal, which is something that, I look back and I think about it. We did the Ryan Day show, the evaluation a few weeks ago, and I think, man, I like Urban Meyer. I think would have really had a hard time with the transfer portal because he was such a control freak. I think he would have struggled with it on both sides of it. That's a hurdle. So all in all, yes, he's done a great job to this point. But we also said next year is go time. Like it is time to shine for Ryan Day. He's everything Harbaugh said wasn't totally off about Ryan Day. Like he did fall into a good situation, and he has kept it going. And some would say even slightly better with the playoff win over Clemson, which it's hard to remember. It's only been a little over a year ago how big that was.
Yeah.
But now it's his program. The players in there belong, quote unquote, belong to him now. He's responsible. You know what I mean? Like the buck stops at his desk. All the coaching hires. He's got a lot of he's got a very good looking season coming up. Great possibilities, but he's also got a lot of weight on his shoulders.
He does. So you think about the possibilities going into next season. We're going to look right at the quarterback position because Ryan Day's had something that I don't know would have been something that Urban Meyer could have prospered or flourished is the word, flourished with a quarterback situation. You get Justin Fields, who transfers shortly after Ryan Day took the head coaching job.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields lands himself on campus in Columbus, gets homesick, but finally figures things out and had a good 2-year career at Ohio State. But then he gets another quarterback, not the same skill set as Justin Fields, and Ryan Day seems to figure things out very quickly. Once Stroud gets things under his belt and the game slows down for him, Ryan Day says, okay, look, you're a starting quarterback. We're not looking to anybody else. You're the starting quarterback. And I think for success next year, I personally expect the best quarterback year that Ryan Day has had at Ohio State. Now, I know it's high praise. I think Stroud can be better than Fields was in year one at Ohio State. I don't think Fields in year two was phenomenal with the way he played.
That was a weird year too. Yeah, you're right.
I do personally believe that year 4 for Ryan Day, with the quarterback that he had, this could be the best year that Ryan Day has as a quote-unquote quarterback coach, because he is not the quarterback coach, but he is quarterbacking or leading the quarterbacks. I think with Stroud's progression, I think with what Ryan Day does, I think Ryan Day knows if we're going to get to the promised land and bring home the natty, I need Stroud to be QB1 and to be the best quarterback in the country, maybe best player in the country. I think that's possible. And I firmly believe that this could be a phenomenal year for Ryan Day. But the expectation for him is for this to be the best coached quarterback year that he's had in Columbus.
Yeah, that was top of my list for expectations and I said no growing pains. We started last year, we stumbled through the Minnesota game, and everything you said, again, we forget that we didn't even really know who the quarterback was going to be much before that game, and there were still doubts after the game, honestly. This year, we've seen it. After what we saw last year and after what we saw in the Rose Bowl, it is 100% Stroud. He should be the best quarterback in the country next year, if not one of them. And his skill set's off the charts. The way he's a great product. He can make all the throws, all of this. So when start game one, your quarterback has to look good. We can't have this like stumbling through it, and then all of a sudden you just start running the running back through the A gap 100 times in a row because you're nervous about this, nervous about that, fighting through a game, winning by a defensive touchdown or something. We cannot have that against Notre Dame game one. This team the offense has to look like it did in the Rose Bowl a month ago, and the defense it better look more like it did a few years ago when Urban Meyer was still the coach. So no more excuses, no more anything, as far as that goes. Day's got a complete team. I know there's a lot of question marks, but it doesn't matter. It's Ohio State. Figure it out. Nick Saban figures it out every year. Kirby Smart figures it out every year. Figure it out. We do not care. This is just like I always say, I don't use the baby reference anymore. Like, just deliver me the pizza. I do not care how you make it. It just needs to be good when it gets to me. And whatever you do in the kitchen is up to you, Ryan Day. But we don't want to sit and watch you figure it out for 4 weeks again. We cannot do this this coming season, or his chair will get really warm, and that's for sure.
Jeff, I'm going to go somewhere here with you and ask you a simple question, because I know there will be fans of different fan bases around the country that tap in on YouTube, because the YouTube channel is growing. And I want to thank everybody watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for that. The growth has been phenomenal, and it's blown me away. But there's going to be somebody out there, maybe a novice, very casual college football fan, or maybe a fan of the team up north, or Alabama, or Auburn, or Notre Dame, or USC, who USC fans are probably excited right now based off things that are going over there in Southern California. But they're going to hear you say, just figure it out. I'm going to ask you this simple question. Why is the requirement for Ryan Day to just figure it out?
It's basically what it is, he last year he starts the season, and Jay, you brought it up many times. He was learning like through the games. He was. How many times do we ask ourselves like, how did you not see this in August or in July when you're practicing? And then you've got linebackers out there that don't know what they're doing. You got
Jeff, that
defensive
was like
back.
after every game, bro. It didn't matter win or loss. It
Yeah.
was like after every game, we're like, we see this and we're not there. We don't watch the film like you do.
Yeah.
You have way more resources than us, but we're saying we see it. Why can't you see it?
Yeah, he needs to, in the summertime, in spring practice and all that, he needs to see it. He needs to be committed to it. That's another one I said on day one. I need a set starting lineup. I understand that some players are going to work themselves up through the season, and a player may just figure it out and be better. But last year was like, okay, let's throw a bunch of players out there. Let's put whatever combination of offensive linemen out there, and then figure a defense especially. Let's just rotate people in until we figure it out. No. When that starting lineup day one he needs to figure out who the starters are in camp. And that's what Meyer, now credit to Urban Meyer, when he was there, he was so good at practice and camp and all that. He really made these guys battle, when they were there. He made them fight for their position. So he figured out who his players were and who the guys were that he could depend on in the summer and in the spring and in these miserable practices that they had. So when you got to game one, he had a tough team that had confidence that they deserved to be on the field. And it seems like Ryan Day's guys last year, they were questioning themselves. A lot of them felt out of position. And I know a lot of it's hopefully going to be cured, with Knowles, the defensive coordinator now. Hopefully but still, what I'm saying about Day is like, if he looks over at the defense and is like, that doesn't feel right, it's his job now to speak up, because it's literally his job on the line. He can't learn these things week to week anymore. And then you take a bad loss with 4 teams in the playoffs, like you might be out of the playoffs, and I think that, hurt him against Oregon last year. We saw a lot of that. And, definitely hurt him in the Michigan game, just not enough battle tested kids, too many guys out of position. I'm sorry if you don't have the players, you got to develop them in the summer and turn them into players. That's another thing. We need some more player development. So I know it sounds like I'm being negative, but I'm talking about in order to win a national championship. If you're happy with going to not a BCS, a New Year's Six bowl game and winning, then we have no problems, because we can do that till the end of time with the way things are set up right now. But I think guys like me and Jay Stevens, we won a national title, and we're watching what Georgia and Alabama look like on the field. Look what their players look like, their development looks like, their size, their strength. There is a gap, right now between the two, and Ryan Day needs to close that gap this summer. That's just the facts.
That is. And one reason that I love having Jeff come on the show is because Jeff and I, we think similarly, but we don't share notes before. I literally sent him a text or two about the idea we're going to talk about, but that's it. Jeff has his notes. I have mine. A lot of mine are in my head, and some of them are on paper, but we don't share things. And also, one thing I would love this podcast to continue to be is a resemblance of what you hear from sports talk radio hosts and podcasts from the South. They don't care about what the coaches, they share their opinion, and they really just want to be as hard as they can be as realistic as they can be about their coach. That's one reason why I do think Nick Saban is so good, is because he knows the pressure down there in the South is different than it was at Michigan State. It's different than it was when he was a Cleveland Browns coach. They put pressure on him, and he knows he has to deliver. Or one, he'll get fired, and two, he will get scraped through the coals. And Jeff, you also said something that we talked about last year that should be an expectation for this upcoming season. Set a day one starting lineup, because we watched all throughout the year. We knew there was more leaning towards Stroud, wasn't concretely Stroud, but we knew going into the season who should possibly be on the field. Throughout the season, we saw who should be on the field. But I think going into the season, the players even realized game 1, game 2, I am still fighting for my starting spot in game 1, game 2, game 3. There's nothing solid or solidified about the starting lineup right now. I have said it before. I'll say it again. I still think Mayan Williams should have gotten more carries throughout the season than Travion Henderson. I don't care about the yards Henderson had or the records that he broke. I think for situational purposes, there were times Mayan Williams, and that was just one situation. That's not the entirety of everything. But setting a lineup on day one is an expectation, not only for you, but it's going to tell your players who they're going to be playing with. I'm a former offensive lineman, played O-line in high school, and Jeff, we talk about it sometimes. One of the worst things for an offensive line is to not know who's going to be to your right or who's going to be to your left. If your center is not the guy you think should be there, psychologically, you guys have a double team. That double team might not be the proper speed or the proper strength because the guy next to you in your left, he might not be up to speed. And in your mind, you might go harder because you think you need to. And then he goes harder because he thinks he needs to. The next thing you know, that guy is supposed to be double teamed is spinning off of the guy on the inside, the center, and he's in the backfield getting a sack. Why? Because there was no communication.
Yep.
Setting an expectation for the starting lineup day one is not only great for you and your team, it's great for those on the field because they know who's on the field and they know how to work with the guys that are going to be on the field with them.
Yeah, and that leads, again, this is why Jay's the best. It leads right into another point I had. We need a more complex running game. We have all this talent. Henderson, has, all this explosive ability, but when you shift the offensive line around, you have to run such a vanilla running game. It's just, straight up block and then hope that it was basically hope that Henderson breaks the first tackle and then gets a long run. And then they took that away from us later in the season when we started playing better defenses. We need a running game to where you got centers pulling, you got guards pulling either direction, some zone blocking, all these things. And Jay just said it. You cannot do that if you don't know who the offensive linemen are going to be. You can't ask a guy.
I'm only laughing because it's so comical about how confused I even think the players were like, wait, so the guy that I thought I was going to be running with it between the guard and center, it's not that guy, it's somebody else, and that guy's learning his position or game one, game two because he's not used to this footwork and this hand placement. So what are we doing here? The season went how the season went.
Yeah, and then the running back doesn't have trust. There was a lot of games where Stroud didn't trust these offensive line, even though they did a good job protecting him in pass. They still you don't have that confidence that in the back of your head. We saw it with the defense. It was a big problem with the defense. I just watched the Cincinnati Bengals go to the Super Bowl, and their defense played really great in the playoffs. And what they did was they trusted each other. They played a lot of zone defense, but each guy trusted that the other guy was going to be in their zone. So, you can jump routes faster. You have more confidence. You're not always in the back of your brain thinking I better not fully commit to this because I don't know if who's going to be behind me. Like when you watch that, they have their talent level's probably second half of the league on defense, but yet they as a unit, they played really well. Ohio State never did last year because the guys, you never knew who was at safety. Some of that was injury. I understand. When they went to zone, guys didn't trust the zone. So then all of a sudden there's holes in the zone. Then you get hesitant. And then all of a sudden now you're just waiting to tackle people after 20-yard receptions, just on and on. Linebackers, no faith in the linebackers because nobody knew who was going to be out there. Nobody knew if he was going to do their job. They always had one eye on the guy beside him, and the offensive line did the same thing. Again, the unit that saved the season was the one that we knew was the wide receivers. Never had to worry about them. They had the right combination the entire season. They had the right routes for them. I mean, JSN was in the perfect spot on the field all the time. Garrett's great on the outside. Olave did his thing. So that is what you need from every unit. And that's what I'm saying on day one, this ought to be figured out. It doesn't matter if it's the best combination of players, not the best player. And that's probably my biggest nitpick with Ryan Day is are you putting the right combination of players together, or are you putting who you think's the best players? This isn't a video game. You don't just look at the rating and put them on the field and it works. And we hope Knowles fixes that on defense. That's literally what he does for a living. I assume that he'll figure it out and get guys that know how to play. I can remember when Darren Lee, when he moved to linebacker early on in his career, it didn't seem like it worked. It felt like they were just trying to find a spot for the kid because he couldn't play safety. Next thing you know, he's on it. They won a national title, and a lot of it was his play at linebacker. That's the stuff I'm talking about. But that's the stuff that Saban, Meyer, these legendary coaches, they see in practice. They figured out who wants to fight, who wants to be out there, and who can pick up the information and stuff like that. And that's really what Day. He's great with the quarterback, but that's the only position that he's proven to really have his finger on the pulse of the position, his quarterback, that's a good position to know, but there's a lot more.
We're here with Jeff Hunt from the Off the Ball Network. This is Locked on Buckeyes here on a Wednesday. And you may be listening to this saying, Jay, you have gone over expectations for Ryan Day with the quarterback, that he needs to just figure it out. Need to have a more complex running game, figure out a day one starting lineup. You guys have not talked about the playoff, conference championship, national championship. Why? Because I think Jeff and I are on the same page. We didn't reiterate this. I'm going to say it now. Jeff and I personally believe Ohio State needs to beat Michigan. That's an expectation no matter what. Ohio State needs to win and should win. They're expected to win the conference Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. They're expected to make the playoff. They're expected to make the national championship game. I think those are clear-cut expectations based off, one, the recruiting, which has not been perfect. Two, the players that are currently on the team via transfers and things like that. Three, the immediate and purposeful coaching changes where you're bringing in guys that fill a need immediately that makes you better. But then also, you're not losing to Michigan twice. I have not looked this up. I don't want to look it up. I don't think Urban Meyer ever lost to Michigan. I don't think Jim Tressel lost twice in a row.
No.
So you're losing to Michigan twice in a row. You don't do that. That just does not happen. So he's expected to beat Michigan, really obliterate Michigan. You should, knowing that Jim Harbaugh, even though he got a restructured contract, his buyout is not hefty. So Michigan could still get rid of him after another year if they want to. So beating Michigan, that's not a question. That's something you expect.
Yeah.
Not automatically. It's like the understood you in English.
Yeah,
this team expected.
This team can't lose a Big Ten game. Like, yeah, you're right.
No.
Just so everybody knows, Jay's on the right path. This is all implied. Like going to the playoffs and winning the playoff game is implied for this team. They're going to be ranked in the top 4 in the country going in. They get through Notre Dame. Their schedule is it's very favorable. They're going to be favored in every single game, including Michigan. Michigan's going to be a much different team next year. I'm not saying they'll be bad, but they're a much different team. They're not reloading. Like they got a whole lot going on too. There is no like anything less, honestly, like I suppose a fluke loss, but they still win the Big Ten and get in the playoffs is okay. But like really, there's not an acceptable loss on the schedule. Like, even last year with the new quarterback in Oregon and stuff, we kind of gave him a pass. There's no pass for Ryan Day this year. Like this is what he's there for. He's loaded. And I put on there too. I got play and young player development. I'm really, that's probably my biggest thing I'm looking at day one is like, all we hear every year is like, okay, here's where we finished in recruiting rankings. And we know a lot of people are kind of losing faith in these 5 stars and 3 stars, but High State's getting dudes. They're getting great athletes. We need them to translate into good play. Like next year, like Sawyer's got to be really good. You know what I mean? Like JTT, these guys got to be good. They got to be affecting the game on the field. Henderson's got to be great. And not because of expectations, like that's what you're there to do. You take these great high school athletes and you turn them into great college athletes. Like these guys have to be great. They can't, you can't be like, I thought he'd be better, because there's no doubt in my mind that if these guys are at Alabama, they're better every year. I really am looking at young player development and what these guys can do, because what's going to happen is if you take Jack Sawyer, I think he was the number 1 D lineman in the country or defensive end in the country, basically coming in. It might have changed because he got hurt and stuff, but regardless, he was great. What that means is you should go to the NFL. So here's what happens. If all of a sudden you don't put a guy in the NFL or he doesn't pan out, the other recruits are like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm not going there. I want to get to the NFL. I'm going to a different team that's going to put me in the NFL. So, those are things that a coach shouldn't have to worry about, but that's just a fact. So that's it. That hurts your recruiting. If a good recruit goes there and he gets lost in the shuffle, they talk to each other. Like they all know each other. They all have like, the same guys. So once that word goes around, if a coach can't develop his recruits into, talent to make money, you're going to start losing them. And it affects you on the field. It's 2 things.
Player development has been huge. It's been a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen development on the offensive line. Some say it hasn't been as high as what they expect, but we've seen development on the offensive line. I think DeJuan Jones gets a lot of attention because, of course, he's a big man on campus.
Yeah.
But DeJuan Jones was a good offensive tackle. Was he perfect? No. Could he get better? Absolutely. But I think DeJuan Jones was a good offensive tackle, and being able to take a guy that was 100% all in on basketball in high school. And you know me, I go to high school games. I didn't really go to high school games at Ben Davis where DeJuan Jones went to watch Ben Davis play, to watch DeJuan Jones play football. I wanted to watch a game, and he happened to be there. I used to go to high school basketball games to watch DeJuan Jones in the post. He was that good. And taking a guy that when he gets on campus was not all in football. Once he's all in football, that's a testament to what you've done. That's one person. Yeah. There's other players there that are going to want to look to you, Ryan Day, and expect you to help them develop as players. Because now DeJuan Jones is looking, saying, I'm going to be an NFL draft pick. How high will I be? I don't know. My coach wants me to be a first-round draft pick, so I have to work to be that. That's a testament to Ryan Day making a coaching change. Now you have Jack Sawyer, you have JTT, you got Mayan Williams, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Julian Fleming. You have all of these guys here that are looking to Ryan Day, not so much their position coach. Right. Yes, that person they're with all the time. They're looking to Ryan Day to put them in the right position to be successful. It's an expectation. There's an expectation at Alabama, an expectation at Auburn, an expectation at USC. Now, hopefully it's changing. I hope it does. Hopefully what goes on in Oregon and Washington, because that part of the country, they love their football. Washington has been down. I think it's Brock Hewart's son. I think he's a quarterback out there. I hope Sam Heward does good things out there and helps them be good. There's teams all over the country, Oklahoma and Texas, that have expectations of their head coach to develop talent, regardless of who the position coaches are, to develop the young talent so they're successful while in college, that they graduate, that they have a good GPA, and that they go on to be a good professional in whatever field they go on to be in. Of course, you want them to be in the NFL. That's kind of a selfish thing. But ultimately, some guys won't go to the NFL to be a pro in football. They'll go on to be doctors, lawyers, maybe a school teacher, maybe a personal trainer, whatever it is they want to be. They're going to go on and do that. And these players are looking to Ryan Day to develop them. I went off the field on purpose because, for example, Master Teague, I don't see a route for Master Teague to get drafted. I don't. However, there is a route for Master Teague to be a phenomenal pro in something, even if it's outside of sports. People will look to Ryan Day and say, well, you did a phenomenal job with this young man, even though he had some struggles and he wasn't really the most talented guy. You did a phenomenal job with him and preparing him for his career off the field. So I'm looking at Ryan Day, and I'm being specific on purpose, very blunt in my speech, because there is an expectation.
Yep.
People like. I keep going to Alabama because Alabama's the gold standard. I don't care what you want to say. That's the gold standard. In the Big Ten, Ohio State's the gold standard, but they're not the gold standard in the country. Nick Saban has a factory, and Ryan Day should expect Ohio State to be what Nick Saban in Alabama is. Now, for this upcoming season, let's make strides. Let's keep getting better to keep going forward to strive to be what Alabama is in college football. It can be done. We should be making strides for it to be done. And Jeff, I think in 2022, based off everything we went through in this show, I personally believe we're on the right track. And if Ryan Day does some of these things and then some to make proper strides, I firmly believe Ohio State Buckeye fans, you'll want to be in the shoe every single game to see how these boys kill their opponents on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing Ryan Day needs to do from now until the start of the season, he's a young coach. You know, I'm sure he's trying to feel his way, but he can't let the players, the squeaky wheels determine. I think he tries to keep everybody happy, especially recruits. But what that tends to do is if you got a guy over here working his tush off and he knows, you know, he's doing everything right, but maybe he doesn't jump as high as the other guy. Like Day needs to be able to, you know, have tough love on these players. And it felt like sometimes the guys were like they had been told one thing and they were really living another. You can't do that either. You got to be honest with them. You got to be tough. You know, he doesn't have the clout that they're going to trust him like they do Saban or Meyer. You know, the guys knew that those guys knew if they listen, they get to a national championship. I think Day can earn that though. Like, I really think that, you know, maybe it's, you know, sometimes the best thing, you know, for a player is to like, you're not good enough for this team. You might need to move on. Like, it really stinks, but that's that's just the nature of the beast. That's the profession. I always say this, that's the profession Day chose. You know what I mean? It's tough. You got to make a lot of hard decisions. You got to upset a lot of people and a lot of young, you know, nobody wants to tell a young man he's not good enough or he's not getting it done or that you're taking his job after all the hard work they put in. Unfortunately, you got to be a bit of a, you know, a-hole every now and then. And, you know, I think Day, you know, he's going to have to do that. And I don't know. He seems like a great guy. He's got to take the kids that do believe in him and rise to the top with that. And I think they're going to be just fine. I think he's going. I should say this. I think he's going to do everything that we're asking of him. I really have faith in him.